part of the reason was that many felt that the reason why the League of Nations had collapsed is because countries like the United States did not feel that they were given appropriate power and influence, and that therefore the design of the United Nations would give a permanent and an important status to these permanent 5 countries. Of course, that was 70 years ago, and the world has changed dramatically since then.
Now, recently, in quite an unprecedented briefing with the media and foreign ambassadors who are resident in South Africa, President Jacob Zuma underlines the need for the United Nations to consider how it can transform and evolve to, improve its capacity to respond to modern day challenges. Like you say, things have moved on a great deal since 70 years ago. Now, what are the possibilities here that the UN would even consider this after all these years of the status quo being held?
The last time that there was reform of the UN Security Council was in 1965, when the number of non-permanent members was increased to the current number of 10. I think there were 6 before then, and that was increased to 10. So there are 15 members in the UN Security Council, the permanent 5, and then 10 non-permanent members which are elected for 2-year terms. And since 1965, there have been almost annual efforts to reform the Council, and these have not proven successful at all. This year, there is another effort, and what has now happened is that the UN General Assembly has, for the second time in the last 10-15 years, adopted a so-called negotiation text. And this negotiation text, which is a 25-page summary of the positions of all the countries that have commented on reform of the Security Council, is literally a summary of the various positions that countries taking on their views on the Security Council reform. So there's some excitement that, well, maybe now we can start with negotiations on intergovernmental negotiations, because at least we have a common text. To get to this text has taken 3 decades, many failed attempts. And when you read the text, it is very obvious that there is almost no commonality. Some countries want semi-permanent members, others want themselves to be on the Security Council. These competing interests between countries would make movement forward extremely difficult. And of course, behind this all are the P5. The permanent 5, who have veto rights, have no incentive to give up their veto rights. And they're sitting back comfortably and looking at this chaotic discussion that are countries scrambling for individual power and privilege and to look after their interests, or to make sure that their larger neighbors don't get anywhere. And they have no incentive to reform the UN Security Council. So despite the fact that in this 70th annual anniversary of the United Nations General Assembly, we have a common negotiating text, I do not expect any movement going forward on reform of the UN Security Council. The positions of the various countries are completely intractable.
So you mean to say that this very hot topic of reform, especially among African countries, will be able to find some space on the platform at this General Assembly?
Well, what has happened is that the General Assembly has got a subcommittee on UN Security Council reform. That subcommittee was chaired until recently by the Jamaican ambassador to the UN, Ambassador Courtney Rattray, because the president of the General Assembly has changed, and so the new president of the General Assembly may now appoint a new lead negotiator. So there's a subcommittee within the General Assembly which is tasked and is supposed to take this 25-page negotiating text framework document and then get together and negotiate on that. But we don't know who's going to be the chair of that and what that chairperson may decide on going forward. But the issue is on the agenda, and there will again be many pronouncements, and everybody will say, in principle, we are in favor of UN Security Council.
Elias is the Executive Director of the Institute for Security Studies, and you are speaking to Khz Perry. Cameroon has sealed more border crossings with Nigeria to enable Muslims to prepare for Thursday's Tabaski feast. This follows repeated attacks by Boko Haram militants. Last year, attacks increased on Cameroon's northern border with Nigeria on the eve of Tabaski. Mokikinzega reports from Yaoundé.
Nigeria Bakari, governor of South Cameroon that shares boundary with Nigeria's Borno state, stronghold of the terrorist group Boko Haram, says the decision to seal the border was taken after a series of attacks by suspected members of the group scared the population. He says in two fresh attacks yesterday, which amounted to 7 in less than a week, Cameroon soldiers killed at least 11 assailants in the town of Amchide, and 2 female suicide bombers killed themselves in Nora. He says it is very important to double vigilance on the eve of Tabaski, traditionally used by assailants to increase attacks. He says if not because of increasing vigilance on the part of the population and Cameroon's military, there could have been many more attacks. Businessman Yaya Mbuli, who buys and sells cattle and sheep in Nigeria and Cameroon, says the closure of the border has slowed economic activity. He says the scarcity of land that has led to increasing prices is due to insecurity, and adds that we cannot blame the government of Cameroon because peace has no price. He says he cannot risk his life to go buy and sell the animals. Imam Ibrahima Aouna of Garwa in northern Cameroon says they have reduced the number of Muslim worship grounds and mosques to reduce the risk of attack. He says they have double check points before anyone has access to any mosque and reduced the number of places where people will come out to pray during Tabaski from 15 to 6.
Tout ça pour pouvoir contrôler les fidèles.
Police Commissioner Baba Jibril says they have also decided to deploy security forces to all prayer grounds in Cameroon.
The last feast of Ramadan, police was on the main exit of the mosque. Every Muslim who comes, they have to take him with the for this feast also will do the same thing.
Cameroon has reported at least 20 attacks on its territory this month, with a majority targeting markets, popular neighborhoods, and mosques. Reporting for Channel Africa, this is Moki Kinbuta in Yaoundé.
Across the globe, every second, there's always a breaking story.
Kultra Joy for Channel Africa Radio in Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa.
For Channel Africa, I'm Lillian Streba, reporting from the ICC in The Hague.
Reporting for Channel Africa, I'm Yoda Kekelo in Zambia.
Our cutting-edge and hard-hitting journalism leaves no stone unturned, giving you the whole picture every time.
George Muhango, Channel Africa, Blantyre. This is Lansana Fofana, reporting for Channel Africa from Freetown.
Reporting for Channel Africa in Harare, Zimbabwe, this is Simon Muchemwa.
Reporting for Channel Africa, this is Moki Kinbuta in Yaoundé.
From an African perspective, listen to Channel Africa in English, Kiswahili, French, Silozi, Portuguese, and Chinyanja, informing the world about Africa.
Ntakwana Ngatani in Mohalisuk, Lesotho.
Reporting for Channel Africa,
Mwai Gikonyo in Nairobi.
Channel Africa, the voice of the African Renaissance.